The story of Jesus' baptism that we hear in the book of Mark is unique among the Gospels in one particular way. In Matthew and Luke, the heavens simply open. In John, we hear of the account from John the Baptist. But in Mark, the heavens are torn apart as the Spirit descends like a dove on Jesus. That concept of tearing apart really bookends the book of Mark. When Jesus dies on the cross, it is said that the curtain of the temple is torn in two. We might consider that heaven and earth are both torn apart by the beginning and the end of Jesus' ministry. It's also a Trinitarian image, the Spirit descending like a dove, God's voice from heaven, and the baptism of the Son, the beloved, the one with whom God is well pleased. But we don't linger on Jesus' baptism for long before we start thinking of our own baptism and about what that might mean to us. In one of the paragraphs from the Book of Common Prayer, the Holy Baptism Service, we hear, "All praise and thanks to you, most merciful Father, for adopting us as your own children, for incorporating us into your holy church." Similar ELCA Lutheran words read, "By water and your word you claim us as daughters and sons, making us heirs of your promise and servants of all." Adopted as God's children, claimed as daughters and sons, heirs of the promise and with a ministry of our own to serve all people. Shortly, we'll renew our own baptismal promises. And I'll ask you to dip your fingers in the font, cross yourself, and gather in a semicircle at the front here. So we will recommit ourselves to what it means to have said yes to the baptismal covenant. Now, some churches have tended to emphasize the action of God in baptism, while others have tended to emphasize the action of those who are being baptized. And even those churches, like our own, that baptize infants still have a part where we make promises for those babies until they're able to confirm their faith for themselves. I think there are two parts to a mature sense of baptismal ministry, the ministry all of us share as Christians in the world. The first is to really hear that adoption language. If we are adopted in Christ as sons and daughters, then we need to hear God's words directed at us. "You are my beloved daughter. With you I am well pleased." Or, "You are my beloved son," small s. "With you I am well pleased." So what do you think? Can you hear it without flinching? One of my clergy colleagues said about this text, "At my clergy Bible study group this week, we were all taken by the contrast between 'I am not worthy' and 'beloved.' It's so much easier to live in 'I am not worthy' than accept the beloved. I sometimes have trouble saying the beloved word out loud," she said. "So I started looking around for beloved moments. And today at the mall, waiting for my kid to buy all the things at Players, I saw Dad doing some serious parenting. Hardcore, real deal, shape up or ship out, major life conversation parenting. Dad was near tears, and his kid had no idea. I mean, it was the food court, but still, that dad was loving his kid so hard, and his kid wasn't hearing it. It made me wonder about all the times I say 'I love you' to my kid. At bedtime, through the car window when I'm dropping her off, anytime her friends are around for sheer embarrassment. And how she usually doesn't even notice that I've said anything. I wonder what would happen if the sky would rip open with God shouting down, 'Me too!' Doesn't much of the world, much of the time, live in 'I am not worthy'? That's why we find it so difficult to be honest with each other, or even with ourselves. It's the root of all our posturing, all our addictions, so we can cope with the distance between who we want to pretend to be to the world and who we know ourselves to be in our heart of hearts. It's also the root of the bullying and denigrating of others, trying to make them feel stupid and bad and wrong and ugly, so we can make ourselves feel smart and good and right and beautiful. It's also the root of scapegoating. Something bad happens, someone else must have caused it. This is the antidote. Listen carefully. You are God's beloved child, just as you are right now. No matter how much weight you need to lose, or how behind you are on your payments, or how much you lose sleep with worrying, no matter how often you lose your temper and wonder what is wrong with you. If you made New Year's resolutions that lasted 2 minutes, which makes you shake your head in shame, you are God's beloved child. And if you allow that knowledge, that feeling, to give you wings, you won't be able to sit still. God's words to you, a whisper that may become a shout, is your particular baptismal ministry. Maybe it's the thought that keeps nagging at you, that will ultimately drive you to do the thing you were meant to do in this moment. And that brings me to the second part of mature baptismal ministry. Lewis Weil, liturgical theologian, in a book called A Theology of Worship, has this to say. The foundation of the church's relation to the world is its theology of the incarnation, that God has in Jesus Christ shared totally in our human reality. So we may say that the starting point for a theology of Christian worship is to take the world seriously as the place where God acts. This insight offers us a guiding principle for the relation of each Christian to the world. The work of the church is not to escape the world, but to be the agent of transformation and healing whenever we encounter injustice, abuse, hatred, or indifference. The ministry of each Christian and of each Christian community is found right before our eyes. This helps us to understand why, during the early centuries of Christianity, a newly baptized Christian was referred to as another Christ. This had not so much to do with liturgical rites as with the fact that each individual Christian was called to be Christ in the place where he or she lived. That is where ministry begins, and it is the work of every member of the church, not merely the ordained. So, part 1. In our baptism, we are called beloved. And it often takes a lifetime to allow God's love and acceptance to sink in. And part 2, when it does, we might see the same kind of radical disruption as Jesus saw with the tearing open of the heavens. We might change, and we might change the world around us for the better. Our baptismal ministry is not only individual, but also communal as we live and work in our community of faith and action. Theologian Ron Valadez prompts us to think communally with these questions. Does this baptismal water call us to survive or live? How are we living out our status as a watered people? In other words, what can our baptisms cause to happen in us today? Or what can our baptism cause us to do today? If we are a watered people and God is our gardener, then isn't it safe to say that we have been watered with big plans in mind? Plans that include life, not death. Relationship, not abandonment. Hope, not despair. Movement, not stagnation. growth, not decay, and fruit, not barrenness. Some theologians call it walking wet. We've been baptized with water and the Spirit. God names us beloved children, and then we're given a boost to share that ordination into baptismal ministry in our own unique way with the whole world and with a community that will multiply our best efforts. That's good news.